The white clapboard houses of Woonsocket, Rhode Island, stood silent against the February cold in 2009. Snowbanks lined the narrow streets where generations of mill workers had raised their families, where everyone knew their neighbors, where children played in yards enclosed by chain-link fences. In one of these modest homes on a quiet residential street, a woman vanished. Her name was Sandra Martins, 34 years old, mother of 2 young daughters, a part-time cashier at the local grocery store who smiled at customers and never missed a shift. On February 14th, Valentine's Day, she disappeared from her own home while her husband claimed to be running errands and her children were at school. No body was found. No witnesses came forward. No evidence of a struggle appeared in the tidy kitchen where her coffee mug still sat half full on the counter. The investigation would stretch across months, then years, then finally break open in a way that would shatter what remained of a family already fractured by loss. But in those first hours after Sandra Martins failed to pick up her daughters from school, one question hung in the cold New England air. How does a woman disappear from her own home in broad daylight? The city of Woonsocket sits in the northernmost corner of Rhode Island, pressed against the Massachusetts border like a footnote to New England's industrial past. The Blackstone River cuts through its center, the same river that once powered the textile mills that gave the city its identity and its working-class soul. By 2009, most of those mills had been converted to apartments or stood empty, their tall brick chimneys monuments to a vanished economy. The population hovered around 40,000, a patchwork of French, Canadian, Portuguese, and Irish families whose ancestors had come to work the looms and never left. Everyone seemed connected by blood or marriage or shared history. The streets bore French names: Roche Street, Lafleur Avenue, Desmarais Street. Corner markets sold meat pies and thick-crusted bread. The cold came early and stayed late, and in February the snowdrifts could reach the windowsills of the modest single-family homes that lined the residential blocks.
Sandra Martins had grown up in Woonsocket, born Sandra Pelletier in 1975 to a family that traced its roots to Quebec. She graduated from Woonsocket High School in 1993, worked various retail jobs, and met David Martins at a cousin's wedding in 1998. David was 2 years older, a quiet man who worked maintenance at a plastics manufacturing plant in nearby Cumberland. They married in 2000 in a small ceremony at Precious Blood Church. Their first daughter, Emma, was born in 2002. Their second daughter, Lily, arrived in 2005. The family rented a small 3-bedroom ranch house on Birch Street, a narrow residential road where children rode bicycles in the summer and built snowmen in the winter. Sandra took a part-time position at Shaw's supermarket to help with bills. She worked the afternoon shift 3 days a week, arriving home by 7 in the evening. Neighbors described her as friendly but reserved, someone who kept mostly to herself but always waved hello. She wore her dark hair long and straight. She drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dented rear bumper. She attended Mass most Sundays with the girls while David stayed home. Clears throat. The morning of February 14, 2009, began like any Saturday in winter. The temperature held at 23 degrees. A thin layer of fresh snow had fallen overnight, perhaps 2 inches, enough to dust the cars parked along Birch Street but not enough to require shoveling. Sandra woke at 7, made coffee in the small kitchen with its yellowing linoleum floor and humming refrigerator. She wore sweatpants and a fleece pullover. She got the girls up at 7:30, made them pancakes with syrup, helped them dress in warm clothes. Emma was 6 years old in first grade at Villanova Academy. Lily was 3, still home during the day. David emerged from the bedroom at 8, dressed in jeans and a flannel shirt. He ate breakfast standing at the counter. The girls watched cartoons in the living room, their voices carrying through the thin walls of the small house. At 9:15, David announced he was going to run errands. He needed to pick up motor oil at AutoZone. He wanted to stop at Home Depot to look at replacement parts for the bathroom faucet. He might grab lunch somewhere. Sandra said fine. She was doing laundry that day, folding clothes in the basement, keeping an eye on the girls upstairs. David pulled on his winter coat, a dark blue parka with a torn pocket. He grabbed his keys from the hook by the door. He backed his Ford F-150 pickup truck out of the narrow driveway at 9:23, according to a neighbor who happened to be watching from across the street. The truck's tires crunched over the fresh snow. He drove north toward Route 146, the main highway that connected Woonsocket to the surrounding towns. Sandra spent the morning inside with the girls. She folded towels and sheets in the basement. She made sandwiches for lunch around noon. She let the girls play with dolls in their bedroom while she cleaned the kitchen. The house was quiet except for the hum of the furnace and the muffled sound of children's voices. No phone calls came. No visitors knocked. The street outside remained empty, most families staying indoors against the cold. At some point between noon and 2 in the afternoon, Sandra Martin ceased to exist as a living presence in that house. Exactly when and exactly how would become the central question that would haunt investigators for years. David Martins returned home at 2:45 in the afternoon. He pulled into the driveway, carried plastic shopping bags into the house through the side door that led into the kitchen. He found Emma and Lily sitting on the living room couch, watching television. He asked where their mother was. The girls said they did not know. Emma said Mommy had been doing laundry. Lily said Mommy had made them lunch. David walked through the house calling Sandra's name. Her coffee mug still sat on the counter, a half-inch of cold coffee at the bottom. Her purse hung on its usual hook by the door. Her car keys sat in the ceramic bowl on the hall table. Her cell phone lay charging on the nightstand in the bedroom. Her winter coat remained on its hanger in the front closet. David checked the basement, the bathroom, the small backyard enclosed by a weathered wooden fence. No sign of Sandra, no note. No indication of where she might have gone, or why she would leave her young daughters alone. Clears throat. At 3:15, David called Sandra's sister, Marie Pelletier. He asked if Sandra was there. Marie said no, she had not seen or heard from Sandra that day. David called Sandra's mother. Same response. At 3:30, David called the Woonsocket Police Department. He reported his wife missing. He said he had been out running errands. He said he came home and she was gone. He said her car was still in the driveway, her purse was still in the house. She would never leave the children alone. A dispatcher took the information. A patrol officer arrived at the Birch Street address at 3:52. Officer Thomas Rixey found David Martin standing in the kitchen, arms crossed, face expressionless. The two girls sat quietly on the couch, still watching television. Officer Rixey noted in his report that the house appeared orderly. No signs of a struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass, no blood. The back door was locked from the inside. The front door showed no signs of forced entry. He asked David to walk him through the timeline. David said he had left around 9:20 that morning. He went to AutoZone on Diamond Hill Road, then to Home Depot in Lincoln. He stopped at Burger King for lunch. He returned home around 2:45. He found the girls alone, Sandra missing. Officer Rix asked what Sandra had been wearing. David said sweatpants and a fleece pullover, gray sweatpants, dark green fleece. Officer Rix asked if Sandra had been upset about anything. David said no. Officer Rix asked if they had argued that morning. David said no. Officer Rix asked if Sandra had any history of leaving, of taking off without notice. David said absolutely not. Never. She was devoted to the girls. By 4:30 that afternoon, additional officers arrived. Detective Linda Santos took charge of the initial investigation. She was a 14-year veteran of the department, experienced in missing persons cases. She interviewed David again, this time more thoroughly. She asked for receipts from his errands. David produced a receipt from AutoZone timestamped at 10:14 in the morning and another from Home Depot timestamped at 11:37. No receipt from Burger King. He said he had paid cash. Detective Santos asked exactly when he had arrived home. He said 2:45, maybe 2:50. She asked if he had noticed anything unusual when he walked into the house. He said no, just that Sandra was not there. She asked what the girls had told him. He said they were watching television. They did not seem to know where their mother was. Detective Santos spoke with Emma separately, crouching down to the child's level in the small bedroom decorated with posters of cartoon princesses. Emma said Mommy had made lunch. Emma said Mommy had gone to the basement. Emma said she did not know where Mommy went. Lily was too young to provide much detail, only nodding or shaking her head to yes or no questions. As evening descended, the temperature dropped to 15 degrees. Darkness came early in February. Detective Santos organized a neighborhood canvass. Officers knocked on every door on Birch Street and the surrounding blocks. Had anyone seen Sandra Martins that day? Had anyone seen her leave the house? Had anyone noticed any unfamiliar vehicles in the area? The responses were uniformly negative. Most neighbors had been inside all day because of the cold. One elderly man said he had seen David's truck pull out of the driveway in the morning, but had not seen Sandra at all. A woman 3 houses down said she thought she heard a car door slam sometime around midday, but could not be certain of the time and had not looked out to see whose car it was. By midnight, a full search operation was underway. The Woonsocket Police Department contacted the Rhode Island State Police for assistance. K-9 units were requested for the following morning. Detective Santos obtained permission to search the Martins' home thoroughly. David signed a consent form without hesitation. Officers spent hours examining every room, every closet, every drawer. They photographed the coffee mug, the laundry in the basement, the girls' toys scattered on the bedroom floor. They bagged Sandra's cell phone, her purse, her toothbrush for potential DNA evidence. They found nothing that explained her absence. No signs of violence. No indication of packing or planning to leave. Her clothes remained in the closet. Her medication sat in the bathroom cabinet. Her wedding ring lay on the soap dish by the kitchen sink, something David said she often removed when doing dishes or laundry. For those who have ever experienced the sudden disappearance of someone you love, you understand the particular species of terror that accompanies not knowing. Worse than confirmation of death is the absence of any information at all, the mind cycling through endless possibilities, each more horrifying than the last. On Sunday, February 15th, the search expanded. Volunteers arrived from across the city and surrounding towns. Sandra's family distributed flyers with her photograph, a smiling image from the previous Christmas showing her dark hair, her gentle smile, her ordinary beauty. The flyers listed her height as 5'4", her weight as 130 pounds, her age as 34. Last seen wearing gray sweatpants and a dark green fleece pullover. Anyone with information was urged to contact the Woonsocket Police Department immediately. Search teams spread through the neighborhoods, through the parks, along the banks of the Blackstone River where ice formed at the edges and the water ran black and cold beneath the winter sky. K-9 units tracked Sandra's scent from the house to the driveway and then lost it, as if she had climbed into a vehicle and vanished. Detective Santos reviewed the timeline obsessively. David had left at 9:23 in the morning. His AutoZone receipt showed 10:14. The drive from Birch Street to the AutoZone on Diamond Hill Road took approximately 12 minutes. That left roughly 39 minutes unaccounted for between when he left and when he made his first purchase. His Home Depot receipt showed 11:37. The drive from AutoZone to the Home Depot in Lincoln took approximately 25 minutes. That timeline fit more closely. But where had he gone for lunch? How long had he spent at Burger King? When exactly had he returned home? Detective Santos drove the routes herself, timing each segment. She noted that Diamond Hill Road passed near several secluded areas, including wooded lots and the grounds of a closed manufacturing facility. She requested David come in for a follow-up interview. Clears throat. On Monday, February 16th, David Martins arrived at the police station accompanied by his brother-in-law. He had not hired an attorney. He sat across from Detective Santos in a small interview room and answered questions for 3 hours. He repeated the same timeline. He had left around 9:20. He went to AutoZone, then Home Depot, then Burger King. He returned home around 2:45. He found Sandra gone. Detective Santos asked him to describe his relationship with Sandra. He said it was fine, normal. They had the usual stresses of raising young children and managing bills, but nothing serious. She asked if Sandra had seemed depressed. He said no. She asked if Sandra had mentioned wanting to leave. He said absolutely not. She asked if he had noticed anything unusual about Sandra's behavior in the days or weeks before her disappearance. He said no, everything had been normal. She asked if he would be willing to take a polygraph examination. He said yes, whenever they wanted to schedule it. The polygraph was administered on Thursday, February 19th, by a certified examiner from the state police. David was asked whether he had any knowledge of what happened to Sandra. He said no. He was asked whether he had harmed Sandra. He said no. He was asked whether he knew where Sandra was. He said no. The examiner noted that David's physiological responses showed deception indicators on all 3 questions. The results were not admissible in court, but provided investigators with a direction. Detective Santos intensified her focus on David Martins. Those who knew him said David had always been quiet, even withdrawn. He did not socialize much. He went to work, came home, watched television. He drank beer on weekends, but not to excess. He had no criminal history beyond a speeding ticket. His coworkers at the plastics plant described him as reliable but distant, someone who kept to himself during breaks and never joined the others for drinks after shifts. His family said he loved Sandra and the girls, that he provided for them, that he had never shown violence or rage. But Detective Santos noticed things during her interviews with him. His affect remained flat even when discussing his missing wife. He did not cry. He did not display the frantic energy most spouses showed in these situations. He answered questions mechanically, without emotion, as if reciting memorized lines. When she asked him to describe what Sandra had been wearing that morning, he paused for several seconds before answering, as though he had to recall something he should have known immediately. The investigation ground forward through late February and into March. Sandra's bank account showed no activity after February 13th. Her cell phone records revealed nothing unusual, just calls to family members and the grocery store where she worked. No one had reported seeing her after the morning of February 14th. Searches of wooded areas, abandoned buildings, and the river yielded nothing. Tips came in from the public, mostly well-meaning but useless sightings of women who resembled Sandra in other cities, none of which panned out. David continued to live in the house on Birch Street with the 2 girls. Sandra's sister Marie took time off work to help care for the children. She later told investigators that David seemed almost relieved, as if a burden had been lifted. He did not talk about Sandra. He did not keep her photograph displayed. He boxed up her clothes within weeks of her disappearance and stored them in the attic. Investigators obtained search warrants for David's truck and his work locker. Forensic technicians examined the truck's interior for any trace of blood, hair, or fibers that might indicate Sandra had been inside the vehicle. They found nothing definitive. The truck had been detailed at a car wash on Route 146 on February 15th, the day after Sandra disappeared. David said he had taken it through the wash because of road salt and winter grime. Detectives noted the timing. They checked the odometer reading against David's claimed route on February 14th. The mileage did not quite match. According to the odometer, David had driven approximately 63 miles that day. The round trip from Birch Street to AutoZone to Home Depot and back should have totaled roughly 38 miles. That left 25 miles unaccounted for. When confronted with this discrepancy, David said he must have driven around a bit, maybe taken a longer route. He could not remember exactly. Deputies whispered quietly among themselves that something was wrong, that David's story did not hold together, that his demeanor suggested guilt rather than grief. But without a body, without physical evidence, without witnesses, they had no case. The investigation continued through the spring, but leads dried up. Media coverage faded. The story moved from front pages to occasional updates. By summer, the case was effectively cold. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, you know the corrosive effect of that doubt, the way it eats at trust and certainty, the way it transforms every interaction into a calculation of truth and lies. In July of 2009, Sandra's mother, Claire Pelletier, filed a petition in family court seeking custody of Emma and Lily. She argued that David was not capable of properly caring for the girls, that the circumstances of Sandra's disappearance cast suspicion on him, that the children would be better served living with their maternal grandmother. David fought the petition. A court-appointed guardian interviewed both girls. Emma, now 7, told the guardian that she missed her mother. She said her father did not talk about her mother. She said sometimes she heard her father talking on the phone late at night, saying things she did not understand. The guardian asked what kinds of things. Emma could not articulate specifics, only that his voice sounded different, harder. The guardian's report recommended the girls remain with David in the absence of any evidence of abuse or neglect. The judge ruled in David's favor. Claire Pelletier wept in the courtroom. The months became years. In 2010, Sandra was declared legally dead by a probate judge. David collected on a small life insurance policy. He sold Sandra's car. He continued working at the plastics plant. The girls attended school, grew older, seemed to adapt to life without their mother. But those close to the family noticed things. Emma became withdrawn. She drew pictures in school of a woman lying down, eyes closed, surrounded by trees. Her teacher contacted a school counselor. The counselor spoke with Emma gently, asking about the drawings. Emma said it was her mother sleeping. The counselor asked where her mother was sleeping. Emma said in the woods. The counselor asked if Emma's father had told her this. Emma shook her head. The counselor asked how Emma knew. Emma said she just knew, she had seen it in a dream, but it felt real. The counselor documented the conversation and contacted the police department. Detective Santos interviewed Emma again, but the child could provide no concrete details, only vague impressions and feelings. Clears throat. In 2011, David began dating a woman named Angela Costa, a cashier he met at a convenience store. Angela moved into the house on Birch Street by the end of the year. Sandra's family was appalled. They confronted David, demanding to know how he could move another woman into the home he had shared with their missing daughter and sister. David said he had a right to move on with his life. He said Sandra was gone and he needed companionship. Angela seemed oblivious to the tension, or perhaps she chose to ignore it. She tried to bond with the girls. Emma resisted. Lily, younger and more malleable, accepted Angela's presence with the adaptability of childhood. In 2013, David and Angela married in a brief ceremony at City Hall. No members of Sandra's family attended. The girls served as witnesses. Photographs from that day show David in a suit that did not quite fit, Angela in a simple white dress, Emma and Lily standing beside them with expressions that might have been smiles or might have been something else entirely, something more complicated, something that suggested knowledge they could not yet articulate. By 2015, the marriage showed cracks. Angela complained to friends that David was distant, that he drank more than he had when they first met, that he sometimes disappeared for hours without explanation. She said he had nightmares, that he would wake up in the middle of the night and sit in the dark living room, staring at nothing. She said he never wanted to talk about Sandra, that the subject was forbidden in the house, that Emma was not allowed to keep photographs of her mother in her bedroom. Angela began to wonder what she had gotten herself into. She began to ask David questions about the day Sandra disappeared. He told her to stop. He said it was none of her business. He said the police had investigated and found nothing. He said Angela needed to trust him or leave. In March of 2016, Angela left. She packed her belongings while David was at work and moved back to her mother's apartment in Central Falls. She filed for divorce. During the proceedings, her attorney asked if there was any information about David's character that should be disclosed to the court. Angela hesitated. She said David had told her things late at night after drinking, things about Sandra. The attorney pressed for details. Angela said David had implied that Sandra had been planning to leave him, that she had wanted to take the girls, that he could not let that happen. Angela said David had never explicitly confessed to anything, but the implication was clear. The attorney contacted the Woonsocket Police Department. Detective Santos, now a lieutenant, interviewed Angela. Angela repeated what she had said but could provide nothing more concrete, no direct admission, no specific details that could advance the case. Emma turned 14 in 2016. She was in 8th grade at Woonsocket Middle School. She had become a quiet, serious student who spent much of her time reading in the school library. She kept a journal that she hid under her mattress. In that journal, she wrote about her mother, about fragments of memory, about things she thought she remembered from that February day 7 years earlier. She wrote about hearing her parents arguing the night before her mother disappeared, though she had never mentioned this to police. She wrote about hearing the truck start up that morning, then hearing it return, then hearing it leave again. She wrote about her father coming into the house and asking where Mommy was, but she wrote that his voice had not sounded surprised. She wrote that she knew what had happened even though she had never been told, that the knowledge lived inside her like a stone. In October of 2016, Emma's English teacher assigned a project about family history. Students were asked to interview a relative and write about a significant family event. Emma asked her grandmother Claire if she could write about her mother's disappearance. Claire said yes, of course. Emma conducted the interview at her grandmother's apartment, recording it on her phone. She asked Claire to describe Sandra. She asked what Sandra had been like as a mother. She asked what Claire thought had happened. Claire said she believed David had killed Sandra. She said she had believed it from the beginning. She said the police knew it too but could not prove it. Emma asked why her father would do such a thing. Claire said Sandra had been planning to leave him, that Sandra had confided this to her weeks before she disappeared, that Sandra had been afraid of David's reaction. Emma returned home that evening and confronted her father. She asked him directly if he had killed her mother. David stared at her for a long moment. Then he told her to go to her room. She refused. She stood in the kitchen, this 14-year-old girl who barely reached her father's shoulder, and demanded the truth. David said there was no truth to tell. He said her mother had left them. He said Emma needed to accept that and move on. Emma said she did not believe him. She said she remembered things. David asked what she remembered. Emma said she remembered hearing the truck come back that morning before he said he had come back. She said she remembered him carrying something wrapped in a tarp out to the truck. David went very still. He asked where she had gotten that idea. Emma said it was not an idea, it was a memory. David said she was wrong, that she was confusing dreams with reality, that she had been 6 years old and could not possibly remember accurately. Clears throat. In November of 2016, Emma contacted the Woonsocket Police Department herself. She asked to speak with someone about her mother's case. Lieutenant Santos met with her at the station, this time without David present. Emma was old enough now to be interviewed without a parent's consent. Emma told Lieutenant Santos what she had told her father. She said she remembered her father returning home that morning, earlier than he had claimed. She said she had been in her bedroom but had heard the truck pull into the driveway. She said she had looked out her window and seen her father carrying something from the house to the truck, something heavy and awkward, wrapped in a blue tarp. She said she had not understood what it was at the time, but she understood now. Lieutenant Santos asked why Emma had never mentioned this before. Emma said she had been 6 years old. She had been interviewed by police once and had been frightened. She had blocked out many of the details until recently when they started coming back in dreams and flashbacks. Lieutenant Santos asked if Emma would be willing to testify to this. Emma said yes. The case reopened officially on November 18, 2016. The Rhode Island State Police Major Crimes Unit took over the investigation. Detective Sergeant Michael Ferrante led a team that included forensic specialists, evidence technicians, and investigators experienced in cold case homicides. They re-examined every piece of evidence from 2009. They re-interviewed witnesses. They brought in cadaver dogs to search properties associated with David Martin's, including the house on Birch Street, his workplace, and a small cabin his family owned in the woods near Burrillville. The dogs alerted in the basement of the Birch Street house, specifically in the area where the washing machine and dryer stood. Forensic testing of the concrete floor revealed trace amounts of blood, degraded by time and cleaning but still detectable through luminol and DNA analysis. The blood was Sandra's. On December 3, 2016, Detective Sergeant Ferrante obtained an arrest warrant for David Martins. The charge was murder in the first degree. At 6 in the morning, officers surrounded the house on Birch Street. David emerged in his work clothes, preparing to leave for his shift at the plant. He was handcuffed on his front lawn while neighbors watched from their windows. He said nothing. His face remained expressionless. Emma and Lily were placed temporarily with their grandmother Claire. David was transported to the adult correctional institutions in Cranston. He was held without bail. The arrest made front-page news across Rhode Island. After 7 years, the case that had haunted Woonsocket was moving toward resolution. Community reaction split along predictable lines. Sandra's family expressed relief and grief. Her sister Marie told reporters that they had known all along, that justice had taken too long but had finally arrived. David's family maintained his innocence. His brother told reporters that David was being railroaded, that the evidence was circumstantial, that Emma's memory could not be trusted after so many years. The public largely sided with the prosecution. The story fed into every nightmare about the danger that could exist within one's own home, within one's own marriage. The investigation continued even after the arrest. In January of 2017, acting on information from Emma about places her father had taken her in the past, investigators conducted searches in the woods off Route 102 near the Burrillville town line. In a shallow grave approximately 200 yards from a dirt access road, beneath 7 years of accumulated leaves and forest debris, they found human remains wrapped in a deteriorated blue tarp. Dental records confirmed the remains were Sandra Martin's. The medical examiner determined cause of death to be blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with being struck multiple times with a heavy object. David was additionally charged with abuse of a corpse and obstruction of justice. The trial began in October of 2017 at Providence County Superior Court. The prosecution presented a methodical case built on circumstantial evidence, forensic findings, and Emma's testimony. They argued that David had killed Sandra on the morning of February 14, 2009, during an argument about her intention to leave him. They argued he had struck her with a hammer found in his truck's toolbox, a hammer that still contained microscopic traces of blood matching Sandra's DNA. They argued he had wrapped her body in a tarp and placed it in his truck, then driven to the house as if leaving for errands to establish his alibi. They argued he had then driven to the woods near Burrillville, buried the body, and proceeded with his planned stops at AutoZone and Home Depot to create receipts that would support his timeline. They argued he had returned home later than he claimed, which explained the missing mileage and Emma's memory of hearing the truck return twice. Emma testified for 2 days. She was 15 years old, composed but clearly struggling with emotion. She described what she remembered from that morning. She described looking out her window and seeing her father carrying something wrapped in blue tarp from the house to the truck. Defense attorneys challenged her memory, pointing out that she had not mentioned this in initial interviews in 2009. Emma explained that she had been 6 years old and traumatized, that the memories had been suppressed until recently. The jury listened intently. Several jurors were observed wiping tears from their eyes. The defense presented an alternative theory. They argued that Sandra had left voluntarily, perhaps with another man, and that someone else had killed her years later. They pointed out that no one had witnessed David committing any crime. They argued that Emma's recovered memory was unreliable and possibly influenced by her grandmother's statements. They argued that the blood in the basement could have come from any number of innocent sources. They argued that David had been a devoted father who had stayed and raised his daughters alone while under suspicion. The jury deliberated for 8 hours. On November 2, 2017, the jury returned a verdict of guilty on all counts. David Martin showed no reaction. He stared straight ahead as the verdict was read. Sandra's family embraced in the courtroom. Emma sat with her grandmother, her face buried in Claire's shoulder. David was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He was transferred to the maximum security facility in Cranston. He maintains his innocence to this day. He has filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. Emma is now a college student studying psychology. She has said in interviews that she wants to help other children who have experienced trauma, who carry buried memories, who struggle to articulate truths that adults may not want to hear. Lily, younger when it happened, remembers less but has undergone therapy to process the loss of both parents, one to death and one to prison. Sandra's family gathered in 2018 at a private ceremony to finally bury her remains in St. John's Cemetery in Woonsocket. Her gravestone bears a simple inscription: Sandra Marie Pelletier Martins, beloved daughter, sister, mother, 1975-2009. Gone but never forgotten. The case represents both the best and worst of how justice operates. It took 7 years for the truth to emerge. 7 years during which 2 young girls grew up in the home of their mother's killer. 7 years during which evidence degraded and memories became complicated by time and trauma. But the truth did emerge. A child found the courage to speak. Investigators found the determination to reopen a case that had gone cold. A community found the will to remember a woman who had vanished without a witness, without a trace, without anyone to speak for her except those who refused to stop believing that she mattered, that her absence demanded explanation, that justice delayed could still be justice delivered. The story of Sandra Martins remains a reminder that violence often wears the most ordinary face, that danger can live in the most familiar places, that the people we trust most can harbor the darkest intentions. It reminds us that children see more than adults realize, that their voices deserve to be heard even when their words are difficult to process, that truth has a way of surfacing even when buried deep in the woods of Burrowville or the recesses of traumatized memory. It reminds us that some cases are solved not by brilliant detective work or technological advances, but by the simple accumulation of small details that do not fit, by the quiet persistence of those who loved the victim, by the eventual breaking point when secrets become too heavy to carry. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.